Richard Sterling's name carried weight in the city's elite circles. He wasn't just a millionaire, he was a man people envied, admired, and whispered about in hushed tones. His business empire stretched across luxury hotels, high-rise apartments, and cutting-edge tech firms. Magazines called him the Golden Hand, newspapers printed his face on their front pages, and television shows speculated about his next venture. But behind the shimmering glass towers that bore his name, behind the perfect tailored suits and the spotlight of success, Richard kept a secret life that mattered more to him than any billion-dollar deal. His daughter, Emily. Emily was only 7 years old, yet her laughter had the power to melt away the weight of the world from Richard's shoulders. She was the light he desperately clung to ever since tragedy had stolen his wife from him 4 years earlier. Emily had been barely 3 when her mother passed away, leaving Richard lost, broken, and unsure of how to be both a father and a mother. In those fragile years, someone else had stepped into Emily's world, someone who would become her anchor. Clara. The silent guardian Clara Bennett was 26 when she was hired as Emily's caretaker. She was not born into wealth, nor did she ever dream of stepping inside the marble halls of Sterling Manor. Her life had been simple. She grew up in a small town, lost her parents early, and worked her way through hardships with resilience. When she first arrived, Emily was shy, withdrawn, and often cried herself to sleep. But Clara had a warmth about her, a patience that couldn't be faked. She sang bedtime lullabies, braided Emily's golden hair in the mornings, and listened with real attention when the little girl spoke about the most trivial things. "Good morning, Princess," Clara would say each day, drawing open the velvet curtains in Emily's room. And every morning, Emily would throw her tiny arms around Clara's neck and reply with a giggle, "Good morning, Clara. Can we go for ice cream today?" Clara always smiled back, her eyes crinkling with genuine affection. Maybe if someone finishes her homework first? Over the years, Clara had become more than a maid or caretaker. She was Emily's confidant, her safe place, the one who filled the gaping hole left by a mother's absence. Richard knew it too. Though he rarely said it out loud, he trusted Clara with Emily more than he trusted anyone else in the world. Vanessa. The fiancée, but there was another presence in their lives now, one that would change everything, Vanessa Cole. Richard's glamorous fiancée. Vanessa was the kind of woman people turned their heads to admire when she entered a room. Tall, elegant, with glossy hair and a smile that sparkled like diamonds, she belonged to the world of charity galas, designer boutiques, and endless champagne. For Richard, who had been lonely for years, Vanessa's charm was intoxicating. She made him feel young again, desired, alive. Yet beneath her flawless surface, Vanessa harbored a truth Richard failed to see. She loved Richard for his wealth, for the life of luxury he offered, and for the prestige of being associated with the Sterling name. But what she didn't love, what she couldn't even tolerate, was his daughter. Emily was, to Vanessa, an inconvenience. A constant reminder that Richard's heart belonged elsewhere first. Vanessa tried to hide her disdain, but it showed in subtle ways. When Emily asked her, "Do you think I'll wear shoes like yours when I grow up?" Vanessa responded with a stiff smile and a dismissive, "Sweetie, those things aren't really for you." Then she would return to scrolling through her phone, ignoring the disappointed look on the little girl's face. Clara noticed everything. She saw the way Vanessa's forced smile never reached her eyes, how her tone shifted from sugary sweet when Richard was around to cold and sharp when he wasn't. Clara's instinct screamed that Vanessa's affection for Emily was nothing but a performance, but Clara never voiced these concerns. She knew her place in the Sterling household, loyal, quiet, invisible, unless needed. Her duty was to Emily, and Emily alone. Life inside Sterling Manor was a fortress of wealth. The sprawling estate sat atop a hill, its glass walls reflecting the sky, its gardens manicured to perfection. Chandeliers hung in the grand halls, marble floors gleamed under spotless polish, and expensive art adorned every room. To the outside world it was a palace. Inside, however, the cracks were showing. Richard drowned himself in work, often leaving early in the morning and returning late at night. Vanessa spent her days indulging in social events, spa retreats, and designer shopping trips. And Emily? She lived in a bubble built by Clara's love. It wasn't uncommon to find Emily curled up in Clara's lap, listening to a story, while Vanessa posed for selfies in another room. Or to see Emily running barefoot through the garden, laughing with Clara, while Richard spoke on endless business calls. Richard believed he was building a perfect life again. He thought Vanessa would complete the family he had lost. But what he didn't see, or chose not to see, was the quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. A day out one Sunday morning, Richard surprised both Emily and Vanessa. "Let's spend the day together," he announced at breakfast. "The three of us. Maybe some shopping, then ice cream." "What do you think, Princess?" Emily's face lit up. "Yes, ice cream," she squealed, nearly spilling her juice. Clara, who was buttering toast for her, chuckled softly. Vanessa, seated elegantly across the table, adjusted her silk scarf and forced a smile. "That sounds wonderful, darling." Her tone carried just enough hesitation for Clara to catch, though Richard remained oblivious. Within an hour, the Sterling limousine purred out of the mansion's driveway. Emily bounced in her seat, singing a silly song, her laughter filling the car. Clara sat beside her, joining in with giggles. Richard drove, occasionally glancing at his daughter in the rearview mirror, a proud smile tugging at his lips. Vanessa, on the other hand, sat poised with her phone in hand, scrolling endlessly, her painted lips occasionally curling in irritation at the noise. Clara watched her quietly, a chill settling in her heart. Something about Vanessa's distant coldness unsettled her, though she couldn't yet put her finger on why. Clara's silent promise as the car sped toward the city. Clara looked at Emily, whose golden hair caught the sunlight streaming through the window. The child's eyes sparkled with innocence, her small hands clutching a stuffed bunny she insisted on bringing everywhere. In that moment, Clara made a silent promise to herself. No matter what, I will protect her. Even if it costs me everything, she didn't know that promise would soon be tested in ways she could never have imagined. The Sterling limousine slid gracefully into the underground parking lot of the city's largest luxury mall. The air inside was hot, thick with the smell of asphalt and engine fumes. As the chauffeur parked the car, the hum of voices and the clatter of shopping carts echoed through the concrete chamber. Emily pressed her nose to the tinted window, fascinated by the rows of cars lined up like soldiers. "Papa, can we get ice cream after this? Please, please, please," she begged, her voice bubbling with excitement. Richard chuckled, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Of course, Princess. Your favorite place. Double scoops." Emily squealed with joy, clutching her stuffed bunny to her chest. Clara smiled, her heart warmed by the child's pure happiness. But beside Richard, Vanessa shifted impatiently, sliding her sunglasses over her eyes. "Darling," she said, her voice laced with sugary persuasion. "We only need a few minutes, just some quick shopping. Why don't you both come inside with me? Clara can stay in the car with Emily." Richard frowned. "It's too warm in here." "I don't want Emily sitting in the car for too long." Vanessa tightened her grip on his arm, her painted nails digging ever so slightly into his sleeve. "Richard, it's nothing. 10 minutes at most. You worry too much." Clara opened her mouth, instinct urging her to speak up, to protest. She could already feel the oppressive heat rising inside the car. But before she could utter a word, Richard sighed, torn between his fiancée's insistence and his own better judgment. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "But make it quick." Vanessa flashed a victorious smile and stepped out gracefully, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. Richard followed, shooting Clara a reassuring glance. "We'll be back soon." Clara nodded, though unease tugged at her chest. Heat rising as the heavy doors shut, the limousine became a glass box, trapping the heat inside. Emily squirmed in her seat, fanning herself with her bunny. "Clara, it's hot," she whispered, her voice already tinged with discomfort. Clara leaned forward, pressing the window controls, but the locks were engaged. Only Richard had the key fob that could override them. She pressed again, harder this time. Nothing. Her heart skipped a beat. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said softly, brushing Emily's hair back from her damp forehead. "Papa will be back soon." But minutes crawled by. The air thickened. Emily's cheeks flushed red, beads of sweat forming at her temples. "Clara," Emily murmured weakly. "I'm thirsty." Clara fumbled through her bag and found a half-empty water bottle. She unscrewed the cap quickly, tipping it to Emily's lips. The little girl sipped, but her small hands trembled. Panic stirred inside Clara's chest. She pulled out her phone and dialed Richard. The call rang once, then dropped. The concrete walls of the garage choked the signal. She tried again and again. No connection. Vanessa's coldness, inside the mall. Vanessa was in her element. She strolled from one boutique to another, admiring designer gowns and glittering jewelry, while Richard trailed behind her, restless and distracted. "You said this would be quick," he muttered, glancing at his watch. "Emily and Clara are still in the car. It's too warm today, Vanessa." "Oh, Richard," she replied, slipping a silk scarf over her shoulders. "They'll be fine. Clara's with her. Stop worrying so much. You'll give yourself wrinkles." Richard frowned, but when Vanessa leaned in and kissed his cheek, his protest faltered. He wanted to believe her. Meanwhile, Clara's unanswered calls blinked on his phone, unnoticed as it vibrated silently in his pocket. Emily's fading strength back in the car. Emily's breathing grew shallow. She tried to sit upright, but her small body slumped against Clara's side. Her lips were pale, her voice barely audible. "Clara, help me." Clara's chest tightened. She could no longer sit still. She pounded her fists against the tinted window, her voice echoing through the garage. "Help! Somebody, please!" she cried. Her palms stung, her throat ached, but no one stopped. Passers-by glanced at the luxury car, assumed the air conditioning was on, and walked away. Desperation clawed at Clara's heart. She spotted a jagged stone near the edge of the parking lot. Snatching it up, she pressed it against the glass. Her hands shook violently. She knew Richard would be furious if she damaged the car, but Emily's fading breaths left her no choice. With a sharp cry, Clara swung the stone. It struck the window with a dull thud, leaving only a spiderweb crack. The impact tore the skin of her palm, blood smearing across the glass. Emily whimpered weakly. "Don't leave me." The sound nearly broke Clara in two. She struck again, and again. Each blow sent searing pain through her hand, each drop of blood reminding her of the urgency. The cracks deepened, but the glass held stubbornly. The father's instinct inside the mall, Richard suddenly froze. A chill ran down his spine, an inexplicable dread. He pulled out his phone at last, only to see multiple missed calls from Clara. "Something's wrong." "Vanessa, I need to check on Emily," he said sharply. Vanessa's eyes flickered with irritation. She clutched her shopping bags tighter. "Richard, you're overreacting," but he was already striding toward the exit. By the time he reached the garage, his worst fears had come alive. The forgotten cry. The echo of Clara's desperate voice filled the parking lot. "Help! Help me!" Richard's heart slammed against his ribs. He sprinted, following the sound, until he saw the scene that would haunt him forever. Clara stood by the limousine, her hands bloodied, tears streaming down her face. The window was shattered in a spiderweb pattern. Inside, Emily slumped against the seat, her face pale, her body limp. "Emily!" Richard roared, fumbling for the key fob. He unlocked the car with trembling hands. Clara tore the door open and scooped Emily into her arms, rocking her gently, whispering frantic words. She couldn't breathe, Clara sobbed. She was dying. Richard, she was dying. Richard's vision blurred. He pressed his lips to Emily's forehead, feeling the frightening heat radiating from her skin. His hands shook as he held her tiny frame, his world collapsing in that moment. And then he saw Vanessa. She was walking calmly out of the mall, shopping bags dangling from her arms, her sunglasses hiding her eyes. And suddenly Richard understood. This hadn't been an accident. His fiancée hadn't forgotten. She had chosen. Richard's heart hammered in his chest as he held Emily's limp body in his arms. The oppressive heat had drained every ounce of strength from her fragile frame. Her eyelids fluttered weakly, and her lips trembled as though whispering some wordless plea. "Emily, stay with me," Richard begged, his voice breaking, his composure shattered. His wealth, his influence, his entire empire meant nothing in that moment. The only thing that mattered was the fragile life slipping through his fingers. Clara knelt beside him, her hands torn and bloodied from striking the unyielding glass. Tears streaked her cheeks as she whispered, "She needs air, Richard. Now, please." Richard snapped out of his panic. "Water. Get her water." Clara quickly reached for the half-empty bottle she had given Emily earlier, pouring a few drops over the child's lips. Emily stirred faintly, her chest rising with shallow, strained breaths. But Richard's rage was no longer hidden. His gaze snapped toward the clicking of designer heels. Vanessa's entrance Vanessa emerged from the mall's sliding doors like a runway model, carrying her shopping bags with casual elegance. She paused when she saw the scene, the broken glass, Clara's bloody hands. Richard crouched on the ground with Emily clutched to his chest. For a fraction of a second, her face revealed irritation, as though the sight was an inconvenience. But then, just as quickly, she arranged her expression into a mask of concern. "Oh my God," she gasped, rushing forward with exaggerated dramatics. "What happened?" Richard's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with fury. "What happened?" His voice shook the air. "You left her in the car." Vanessa blinked, feigning shock. "Richard, I didn't realize, he thundered. "She was suffocating in here while you pranced around with your handbags and your dresses." Clara flinched at the sharpness in his tone, but she didn't dare interrupt. Vanessa's lips trembled, but there was no sincerity in her eyes. "It was just a mistake. I thought Clara had everything under control." "Under control?" Richard cut her off, his voice rising, echoing through the concrete garage. "The doors were locked. The windows sealed. She could have died." Clara's breaking point. Clara could no longer stay silent. Her voice, though shaking, cut through the tension. "She wasn't going to survive much longer. I tried to break the glass. I couldn't. My hands," she lifted them. The raw cuts and blood smeared across her palms, glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights. Richard's chest tightened at the sight. Clara had risked her life, her safety, her everything for his daughter. And Vanessa. Vanessa had walked away. Shattered glass. Richard's gaze fell back on the half-broken window. Something inside him snapped. He stood suddenly, still holding Emily close to his chest. With a guttural roar, he kicked the door. The weakened glass gave way with a thunderous crack, shards scattering across the concrete floor like deadly rain. Emily whimpered softly at the sound, but Richard soothed her, murmuring gently, "It's all right, baby. You're safe now." "Papa's here." Clara instinctively reached out, steadying Emily's head, making sure no shards touched her. Her hands bled more, the cuts reopening, but she didn't care. Vanessa, however, stepped back, her pristine heels avoiding the broken glass as though the mess were beneath her. The accusation. Richard turned on her, his face a storm of fury. "You knew," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You knew she was in here." Vanessa shook her head quickly, her voice trembling with false innocence. "No, Richard. I thought Clara would roll down the windows." "I assumed?" "Assumed?" His roar silenced the garage. "You don't assume when it comes to my child." For the first time, Vanessa's polished composure faltered. She dropped her bags, her voice rising defensively. "Why are you blaming me?" "She's not even my daughter." "You put everything on me when you have a maid for this exact reason." The words cut through the air like a blade. Emily stirred faintly against Richard's chest, as though the venom in Vanessa's tone pierced her even in her weakened state. Clara froze, her heart aching. She had been called many things before, maid, servant, nobody. but never had those words carried such cruelty. Richard's face hardened. His grip on Emily tightened, protective, possessive. His eyes bore into Vanessa's with a rage that chilled the air. "She may not be your daughter," he said slowly, each word like stone. "But she is my daughter, and that makes her your responsibility if you claim to love me." Clara's quiet strength Emily whimpered softly, whispering one fragile word. "Papa." Richard immediately softened, stroking her hair, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm here, princess. You're safe now." Clara gently reached out and dabbed Emily's forehead with a cloth she pulled from her apron pocket, cooling her flushed skin. Her movements were tender, careful, instinctive. Richard watched, struck by the quiet strength radiating from the young maid. Clara wasn't bound by duty or obligation. She acted from pure love, the kind of love that could never be faked. And for the first time, Richard questioned everything he thought he wanted. Vanessa's last attempt, Vanessa. Sensing his shifting gaze, grew desperate. "Richard, don't let this accident ruin us. We're planning a wedding, for God's sake. You can't throw that away over one misunderstanding." Richard's eyes were ice. "A misunderstanding?" He stepped closer, still cradling Emily, until he stood mere inches from Vanessa. His voice dropped, cold and final. "You didn't forget her. You left her." The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, her carefully constructed mask cracked, and Richard saw the truth in her eyes. Resolution of the moment, without another word, Richard turned his back on her. "Clara," he said firmly, "come with me." Clara blinked, startled. "Sir, Emily needs a doctor. You're coming with us." He didn't spare Vanessa another glance. Clara hurried beside him, ignoring the throbbing pain in her torn hands. Together, they carried Emily out of the suffocating garage into the fresh air above. Behind them, Vanessa stood frozen amidst the broken glass, her shopping bags abandoned at her feet, her place in Richard's life crumbling like the shattered window. The city lights blurred outside the hospital windows as Richard sat by Emily's bedside, his large hand wrapped around her tiny one. Machines beeped softly, monitoring her breathing, while a nurse checked her temperature. "She'll be all right," the doctor said gently, adjusting Emily's IV. "Severe dehydration and heat exhaustion, but nothing permanent. She's a strong little girl." Relief surged through Richard's chest like a tidal wave. He lowered his head, pressing his lips against Emily's hand, whispering a silent prayer of thanks. Beside him, Clara stood with her palms bandaged, her face pale from exhaustion. She had refused treatment for herself until Emily was stabilized. The raw cuts on her hands told the story more vividly than words ever could. Richard looked up at her, his voice soft, but weighted with emotion. "You saved her, Clara. I'll never forget this." Clara shook her head, blinking back tears. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Richard said firmly, his gaze holding hers. "Not anyone, not her." Vanessa's final stand hours later, the hospital doors opened with a dramatic swing. Vanessa stormed in, her designer coat wrapped tightly around her, her heels clacking angrily against the tiles. Her eyes darted toward the hospital bed where Emily lay sleeping peacefully. "Richard," she hissed, her voice sharp with indignation. "This has gone far enough." Richard rose slowly, his towering figure radiating quiet fury. "Far enough?" he repeated. "You nearly killed my daughter," Vanessa gasped, clutching her chest in mock offense. "That's ridiculous. She's alive, isn't she? You're blowing this out of proportion because of your maid." Her eyes flicked venomously toward Clara, who shrank back, instinctively protective of Emily. Something inside Richard snapped. His voice thundered across the sterile room, silencing even the nurses passing in the hallway. "She is not just a maid. She is the reason my daughter is still breathing tonight." Vanessa froze, her face paling. Richard stepped closer, his voice low but lethal. "You call it a misunderstanding, but I know what I saw. You didn't forget Emily. You left her, because she is a reminder that I had a life before you, and you wanted her gone." Vanessa's lips trembled, but the silence was her answer. The break Richard's decision was carved in stone. "It's over, Vanessa." The words cut through the air like steel. Vanessa staggered back as if struck. "You can't mean that," she whispered. "Richard, think of what people will say." "The wedding, our future, our future." Richard's laugh was hollow, bitter. "I don't want a future with someone who sees my daughter as disposable." Vanessa's carefully constructed facade shattered. Her eyes hardened, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Richard. No one will ever love you the way I do." Richard turned his back on her, his hand resting protectively on Emily's. "If this is love," he said quietly. "I don't want it." Vanessa's heels clicked furiously as she stormed out of the hospital, her threats echoing into the night. But for Richard, it was as though a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. A quiet dawn. The night passed slowly. Clara sat by Emily's side, humming a gentle lullaby until the little girl's breathing steadied. Richard watched from the doorway, his chest tightening at the sight. When the morning sun spilled through the blinds, Emily stirred, her voice raspy but sweet. "Papa!" Richard was at her side instantly. "I'm here, Princess." "I'm right here." Emily's small hand reached for Clara. "Clara." "Don't leave me." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She leaned close and whispered, "I'll never leave you, Emily. I promise." Richard swallowed hard, emotion thick in his throat. He had seen many things in his life. Business empires rise and fall, fortunes made and lost, but nothing compared to the pure, unconditional bond between his daughter and the young maid who had risked everything for her. The decision later that morning, when Emily was resting peacefully again, Richard approached Clara in the hallway. She looked tired, her bandaged hands folded nervously, but her eyes still carried that same quiet strength. "Clara," he began, his voice heavy with sincerity, "I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You didn't just save Emily's life, you saved mine too." Clara shook her head quickly. "You don't owe me anything, sir. She's a wonderful child. I couldn't let anything happen to her." Richard stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Vanessa showed me who she really is last night. And you showed me who you are. Brave, selfless, loyal. The kind of person I want in Emily's life. The kind of person," his voice faltered for the first time, "the kind of person I want in mine." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had never expected such words from him. "I don't know what the future holds," Richard continued, "but I do know this. I will never let people like Vanessa near Emily again. And I don't want to lose you, Clara. Not after everything." Her eyes glistened, but she managed a trembling smile. "Then you'll never have to." Epilogue. A new beginning. Weeks later, the mansion no longer echoed with Vanessa's shrill laughter or the clatter of her heels. Instead, it was filled with the soft hum of music, the sound of Emily's giggles, and the warm presence of Clara's care. The tabloids speculated wildly about Richard Sterling's broken engagement, but he no longer cared. His empire was strong, his wealth intact, but more importantly, his daughter was safe, happy, and loved. On a crisp spring morning, Richard watched as Emily ran across the garden, her laughter ringing like bells. Clara chased after her, her bandaged hands now healed, her face glowing with joy. For the first time in years, Richard felt peace. He realized that love wasn't found in grand gestures, diamond rings, or social status. It was found in sacrifice, in kindness, in the willingness to bleed for someone else's life. And as he watched Clara scoop Emily into her arms, both of them laughing under the morning sun, Richard knew one thing with absolute certainty. The maid who had shattered the glass had also shattered the walls around his heart.